Hello and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. Today we're with Jacquie Forde. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. You can learn more about 3PGC at 3pgc.org, and links are at the bottom of the description. So you can find more links to 3PGC and to Jacquie Forde there. Also, there is a Q&A box for anybody on Google Plus on the right-hand side of the screen, and we do encourage participation, so if you have questions, please do type them in. So we are very lucky to have Jacquie Forde with us today. Jacquie is a qualified business consultant, coach, nurse, midwife, and Three Principles practitioner with over 35 years experience working in health and well-being, corporates, and personal development. Jacquie works with individuals, organizations to teach them about the principles and to help deepen their understanding of the spiritual nature of life, and she has, for the past 18 months, been campaigning for improvements in mental health policy in Scotland to include the principles as a recognized prevention measure. Jacquie held the first ever Three Principles Parliament event in any parliament in the world when she held a meeting in the Scottish Parliament in May of 2015. Jacquie loves to work with anyone who wants to discover an easier way to live life with more joy and less stress. Thanks, Jacquie, for being with us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bonnie. As always, it's an honour to be asked to speak on the webinars for the 3PGC, so thank you very much for thinking of me. Tonight's topic is beyond self-help, and it's a topic that's very, very dear to my heart as a reformed self-help addict. And tonight what I'd like to do is just to share some stories of my own journey, of clients' journeys, and just really what's fresh for me in the moment. I would love this webinar to be as interactive as possible, for people to ask questions and for us to have a good discussion so that I can be really of the most service to you as you listen and you watch. And I'm going to speak quite slowly just because my Scottish accent, sometimes I get excited and I speak too quickly. So I'm going to try and keep it nice and slow for you. Now, to me, the three principles are the next stage in human evolution. It's a bold statement, but it's truth. It's absolute truth. And this is what drives me every single day to work with clients, to work and campaign for improvements within the parliaments in Scotland and Northern Ireland, to get people to look at the principles as the new paradigm in psychology. It's touching areas of our mental health and well-being, if not all of the areas of our mental health and well-being, that no other mental health therapy is even looked at in any great depth. And as we go through tonight's webinar, I'd like to explain that statement a bit more and just to share some stories with you. Now, I did say at the beginning, I was a self-help addict. From a very, very early age, I did recognise that I thought too much. I was able to see my thinking, but I thought it was something that was to be controlled or stopped. I didn't talk to anybody about it. So I thought I was the only person on the planet who had the kind of thoughts that I had running through my head. And there was a fear of saying anything to anyone for fear that they thought that I was insane. And all of my life, I've looked for ways to try to control my thinking and to stop it. I even have a book that's called Women Who Think Too Much. I get into self-help at a very, very young age because I wanted to be the best human I could possibly be. And in that, trying to be the best human I could possibly be, I thought the way to do that was to look outside of myself. It was to look to others for answers. It was to look in books to hear what other people were saying. I was looking for this blueprint to become the most windswept and interesting person that I could possibly be, the kindest person and the most loving person, so that I could live a life that not only had a good outcome for me, but for those that I love too, because I thought I wasn't enough. So I started to look at neuro-linguistic programming and hypnotherapy, which for me was wonderful. I think it was fantastic because it pointed me in the direction of thought and thinking, and being able to control my state of mind, being able to control the thoughts and the pictures and the sounds that were in my head that perhaps caused me forms of distress that I didn't like. And one thing in particular that I really wanted to work on was I had a phobia of bees and wasps that I'd had ever since I'd been a young child. I have two brothers, and I'm in the middle of these two brothers, and they loved, when I was younger, putting bees and wasps into jam jars, closing the lids, shaking the lids, and then releasing the bees and the wasps. So you can imagine they were all pretty angry when they got out of the jars. So I developed a kind of phobia along those lines, and I thought NLP and hypnosis would help me get rid of that. I think one of my most embarrassing moments in life was, I have three daughters, and on the weekends we would go to the bookstores and hang out at the bookstores, and the girls would go into the section when they were little, maybe they were 6, 4 and 2, and they would go into the section that they loved, all the children's stories, and Jerry loves to read science fiction, so he would be there looking at the science fiction books. And whenever they lost me in the store, Jerry would say to my 6-year-old, my 4-year-old, my 2-year-old, "Where's your mum?" And at that very young age, my kids knew their mum was in the self-help section. Honestly, my daughters are now 23, 21 and 18, and they still laugh so much about how their mum was always in the self-help section of all the bookstores. But these books and the things that I read within the books, they helped. They helped. But they didn't take away what was going on inside my head. They may have quietened my mind for a little while. They may have helped me have a few strategies to become more confident. They may have helped me, sort of parent my children slightly better. But there was always a doing. There was always something to do. There was always somewhere to get to. And that in itself is tiring. I used to work with NLP clients, and I would be exhausted at the end of the day. Before they would come in, I would look at, there's somebody coming in with some kind of phobia. Here are all the techniques that I'm meant to use to help this person with their phobia. Or here are all the techniques I'm meant to use for somebody who has OCD. And by the time the day was finished, I was exhausted. And about 5 years ago, I came across an understanding that we're speaking about tonight called the principles, the 3 principles. And I can honestly say it's been the best understanding of how life works that I've ever seen, not just for myself, but for my clients and for the corporate organizations I work with, and even in the discussions I'm having with politicians, that people see a truth within this understanding that just really lights them up from within. And that's what I find incredibly beautiful, that people who would consider themselves to be broken, who would consider themselves to be needing fixed, who believe that they in themselves are not enough, suddenly see that divine spark that lies within them as it lies within me. That in itself is just one of the most beautiful things in the world to see, and a beautiful gift to share with people. A couple of months ago, I was working with a client who had he's a heroin addict, and he said to me, "Jacquie, when you go home at night time, the only thing that's probably on your mind when you go home is you're thinking about what television station are you going to watch? What are you going to have for your dinner? Where are you going to go for your holidays?" And he started to tell me what he thought about. He said, "The only thing that I think about, Jacquie, is Where am I going to get my next fix? And literally, as he was saying that, he saw his thinking. He saw that he was living in a thought-created reality, and that his thoughts were creating his feelings about the drug. Now, obviously, people can become addicted to products such as heroin or cocaine, etc., and there is a chemical imbalance that happens in the body because of that. But he saw without a shadow of a doubt the power of thought. Now, this is a guy who's been going to therapy for about 20 years to come off of heroin, to come off of methadone. And he had never seen that simple fact that the divine gifts of thought and consciousness bring to life his experience in every single given moment. Now, when you see someone have a revelation like that, it starts to help you see in any given moment how we create what's going on around us. And I had the most wonderful conversation this morning. I was telling Bonnie about, I was in at the Scottish Parliament just having a chat with one of the politicians. And I could see she was understanding more or less some of what I was saying, but not all of it. And what I love about living from this space, living from a space of a clear mind and a full heart is, you know that as life flows through you, you will absolutely come up with what it is you need to say in any given moment of time. And I told her a story. I told her a story about me and a compelling thought that I had, that I hadn't really shared widely up until that point. And the story was, a couple of years ago, we had a couple of little dogs, and every morning I would take the dogs out for a walk. And being dogs, you know, first thing in the morning, they like to do their business, and I would scoop up their poo, and it was in a lovely little bag. And I'd be walking home, and there was a red post box we have in the UK and in Scotland. And every time I passed that post box, I had this incredibly compelling thought. And I'm not just talking about one day, it was every single day I took the dogs for a walk. I wanted to post the dog's poo. I really wanted to put it through the letterbox. But something stopped me. And that something that stopped me was my wisdom. It was my instinct. You know, it could see the humour in what it was I was trying to do. But I just didn't do it. And the minute I told her that story, she burst out laughing. And the kind of laugh that tells you that someone who's seen something incredibly fresh in that moment, they've had an insight into how life really works. And she shared with me that sometimes in the Parliament, she feels like sticking her leg out to trip up some of the other politicians, but she doesn't do it. Other times it gets so boring that she wants to just sort of have a big laugh or pull a funny face. And in that moment is one of these moments of, you see our shared humanity. You see that the people that we put labels on as being above us or more important than us have exactly the same experiences day to day, moment to moment that we have, which I just find absolutely delightful and humbling. And I spoke earlier about neuro-linguistic programming, and I think that's something that I would like to talk about, because that is one of the common self-help techniques that people use, or they go to other people to have these techniques used on them. And over the last couple of years, I've just been seeing more and more deeply where that fits into this understanding. And within neuro-linguistic programming, they talk about a technique or a state of being that's called a know-nothing state. Now, the know-nothing state is just a state of neutrality that requires people to think of things that get them into that state and then anchor that state so that they can hold on to it, really hold on to it, so they don't overreact to things. And what I found with the three principles is that the deeper your understanding, the clearer your mind, the more relaxed that you are, you naturally live in this buoyant state of neutrality, that there's nothing to do. You just don't seem to get as bothered about anything as you might have done previously. And I'd love to share an example of that with you. I was on a flight coming home from Spain with my husband, and we were just sitting, minding our own business. I put my headphones on, I was listening to music, and I hadn't spoken to a soul. And the seats beside us in the rows were empty. And we'd paid extra for the seats just so we could have the extra leg room. And just before the flight took off, the air steward asked a couple of people to come in and sit on the seats. And the man in the row behind us, who'd also paid for his seat, said to the stewardess, "Why is it people are allowed to move into those seats when we've paid for our seats? It makes a mockery of the system that people can do that. What's the point?" And about half an hour later, bearing in mind I still had my headphones in and I was reading, the air stewardess came up to these two people and asked the woman to go to the back of the plane to have a chat with her. And as the woman came back, she leaned over me in a way that was very obvious that she wanted to say something that I would hear. And she said to her husband, "This woman has asked that we be removed from these seats and we leave them immediately. This woman is complained that we haven't paid for these seats and it's not right that we're sitting there." And I took my earphones out because I thought, right, I want her to know that I'm hearing her. And as I took my earphones out, she said to me, "Frankly, I think you're a grumpy old cow." And I just thought, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Now, me in a previous life would have verbally attacked that woman for her rudeness. I would have been vicious with her. Me with this understanding was a woman who was compassionate for this other woman who had obviously experienced something very, very, very different to me. And in that different experience, she imagined that I had spoken to someone. She imagined that I had been the person that had complained, even although I had been sitting there with my headphones in. She was upset. And her reaction to being upset was to lash out at the only thing that she thought was causing the problem, and that was me. And there was nothing I could say. There was nothing I could do. That's not true. It's not that there was nothing I could say or nothing I could do. I just really didn't want to do anything because there didn't seem any point. And as I'm sure you all know, trying to have an argument with someone who's in a low state of mind, you're really just, it's not worth it. And I just let it go. And when I told friends about what had happened, they couldn't believe that I had done nothing. And this is one of the examples of what this understanding has brought to me is this lovely sense and understanding that my well-being is within me 100% of the time. It's like a river that flows through me, just as life flows through me. There is nothing, there is no one, there is no circumstance on this earth that can have an impact on my well-being unless I let it. Because my experience of life in any given moment is through my thinking. That's it. And if I choose to shine my awareness on it, I can choose to create a reality that is frightening and it is scary, or I can choose just to see my reality for what it is. It's a fleeting moment in time. It's all it is. And just as I choose not to look at experiences from my past or take my clients into their pasts to look at and try and sort anything that's going on for them, just as other therapies may do, I don't. Because for me, anything that's happened in the past, it's over. It's absolutely over. And as Sid Banks would say, it's really just a memory carried across time if you bring it back to have a look at it. And I had a discussion today with someone in an organisation, and we were talking about her experience of someone who had been bullying her. And she said it kept coming back to her. It always kept flashing back at her about how this person had made her feel. And I asked her, sort of, how was she dealing with that? How was she coping with that? And she said, not very well, because every time it comes back to me, there may be something that happens at work that triggers a reaction. So, for example, somebody speaks to her in a certain tone. She receives an email that's written in a certain way. She automatically believes that that is a trigger for her experience, instead of realizing it's her thoughts about that trigger that are causing her to have the feelings that she's having in that moment. And it's not the email, and it's not the person. And we talked about that. And we talked about the gift of thought. That there are neither good thoughts, neither are there bad thoughts or errant thoughts or compelling thoughts. It's all thought. And when you start to see the divine gift of thought as this neutral experience that's flowing through you in every single given moment, I think people say we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts every single day. Now, we don't act on 60 to 80,000 thoughts every single day. We choose to act on some of them. And others are insights for us that we act upon without even thinking about what we're doing. I spoke earlier about the phobia that I had for bees and wasps. And this is probably one of the stories that I love the most about my experience with this understanding. I had about 20 odd years of therapy to try and get rid of this phobia of bees and wasps. It was embarrassing. I was the woman who would be walking along the road with her handbag and her briefcase, and a bee or a wasp would come, and I would throw my handbag and my briefcase away and run along the road screaming. Now, I'm 5'10", and I'm not slightly built. And, I'm running away from a wasp that's probably about 1.5 inches in size. Very, very, very funny now to think about it. I wouldn't sit in my garden either, because there were flowers in the garden. Bees and wasps like flowers. And one day I was sitting in my office at home, sitting here, and I was on my computer, and I was just working away, and I heard this buzzing at the window, which is probably only about 6 foot away from me just now. And within this buzzing, all I heard was, that bee is tired. The next thing I knew, I was Googling on the internet, what do you feed a bee that's tired? And it told me that you feed it sugary water. I found myself going downstairs and getting a saucer full of sugary water and placing it right beside the bee that was on my windowsill. I was literally about 2 inches away from the bee. The bee had a drink. The bee left my office. Now, I did nothing to get rid of that phobia. The 20 years of therapy did not work. Normally, the bee came in the office, I would be out of the office. And I wouldn't be back in the office till somebody had got rid of the bee or the bee had left on its own accord. something changed. And this is what is so magical about this understanding, that we get insights into life that are not relevant to anything that perhaps that we're trying to work on. And you suddenly find that so much has changed. So, for example, I have had insights into all sorts of things about who I thought I was, who I think I am, about life. Yet I'd never had one single insight into that phobia about bees or wasps. Not one. It wasn't something I was looking in the direction of. But it was almost like a side effect of this understanding. And I love that. I love that I'm constantly surprised by what has changed for me after the event. I just think that it's so exciting that every day I see something new that's changed, not only in me, but also in the clients and the people that I work with. Because you see, I thought my story was going to be one of a woman who was going to become depressed. My grandmother had a reactionary depression after my grandfather died, and her son died, my uncle died, and my mother became depressed at 50 years old. And I thought, as I hit perimenopause, that's what was going to happen to me too. I really believed that was the way my life was to go. Can you imagine how lovely it is to recognise that that is not how life goes? That the mental health of every single human being on the planet lies within them. That in any given moment, they can see something new and fresh that elevates their level of consciousness and changes the world around them and for them. That's, to me, evolving, humanity evolving. So I guess what this understanding has brought for me, when I compare it to self-help, is it's brought me an understanding of myself and other people, in that none of us are broken, none of us need fixed, and every single one of us has innate health and well-being within us. And that there is no need for us to look outside of ourselves for answers. All we need to do is to become quiet, to listen to our own wisdom as it bubbles up within us. And I always say to people, be lazy with your insights. Be lazy with them. If I have an insight into something, I don't analyse it. That's what I did previously. I would get a bad feeling and I would analyse it and I would try and figure out what was going on and give myself labels for what was happening to me. There's an effortless way to do this with the principles. You're given an insight into something, it flashes by in a moment, just like a cloud passing in the sky. Just let it do what it's got to do. There's no need to look at it. There's no need to analyse it. It will tell you in its own time what it is. It will show you what has changed. I think some of the funniest things for me, Bonnie, are, when so many things have changed for me in my life, is watching other people catch up. It's almost like there's this ghost trail where perhaps you're in a similar experience that you've been in before, and people expect you to react the way that you did before, and their jaws just drop to the floor when you don't. And that's lovely too, because it's fun. So I've been prattling on for about half an hour, Bonnie. I don't know whether anybody has any questions or would like to ask anything.
For those of you who came on after we initially were introducing Jacquie, if you're on Google+, there is a Q&A box on the right-hand side, and you can type in questions. through every story that you're talking about, Jackie, I keep hearing something really prominent, and that's how this understanding brings incredible compassion for every living thing. At first, I was thinking about your compassion for other people and how you can your grounding has really allowed you to see that they're caught up in their thinking and that you don't have to react just because of that. You have that understanding, and then the compassion for yourself, but even compassion for the bee. You know, it's really beautiful. It's a beautiful outcome from understanding the principles.
Absolutely, Bonnie. I mean, it's really funny now, you know, when you're out with me walking, I'll actually put my hand out, hoping the bees will land on my hand, which is just very strange. And I can't help but laugh about it. And I guess that's the other thing this understanding brings people, is the ability to lighten up considerably. When you see that whatever is happening for you is happening to everybody else in any given moment, that they're creating, you know, their experience of life exactly the same way you are. There's a humour. There's a humour that comes from that too, as well as a compassion. That we're all just doing the best that we can in any given moment. And that's allowed me, Bonnie, as well, to you know, look at relationships in the past and to guide other people through relationships that they've had in the past, is that when we see that as human beings, we only ever can do the best we can do in any given moment. There's no need to hold grudges. There's no need to, you know, sort of to judge people or, you know, give them a hard time about something, because we've all been there. We've all been in low states of mind dealing with various issues. I mean, I had one the other night there. I was sitting at my desk and I was creating an email to send out to my mailing list. And the doorbell rang. And I knew that it was my daughter. She'd forgotten her keys again. She does it quite regularly. And instead of being grumpy and opening the door and punching her in the face, not that I would do that, but being angry with her, I found myself going downstairs and talking to an 18-year-old about the magical qualities of keys, and they help humans get through doors. And we both just burst into laughter about it because it was cute and it was funny. And what's the point? You know, she didn't have her key. I was in the house. No big deal. You know, it doesn't make sense. And the lovely thing about sharing this understanding, Bonnie, we spoke about it earlier, about sharing it, because I feel so strongly about the principles being the answer, the ultimate answer to our mental health. The conversations that I'm having with policymakers in parliaments and government in Scotland and third sector, it's very easy to have those conversations because you know that you're speaking fact. You know that everything that is going on at the moment with all of the therapies, the psychotherapies, CBT, mindfulness, you name it, every single therapy that is out there at the moment is looking at from the point of behaviour. So there's this huge gap beforehand that we're not addressing. We're not pointing people to where their experience of life comes from. And it always surprises me, Bonnie, speaking with intellectual, intelligent people, they don't know where their feelings come from. They have no clue. And when you start to sort of point them back to that reality of, well, your feelings can only ever come from thought in the moment. It's that simple. Irrespective, as we said earlier, about your circumstances or the people around you or what's happening, can only ever come from thought in that moment. People start to waken up. People start to see that there's this whole area for development. There's this whole area that needs to be looked at. And I held a meeting in the Scottish Parliament last year, and we looked at public health prevention from the inside out. And in looking at that, all of the public health messages that we have in all of our countries throughout the world are telling people what to do. Fasten your seatbelt. Don't smoke. Don't drink too much. Smoking harms your health. All of these messages are just like all of the self-help therapies. It's something we're reading outside of ourselves. And it's only when we hear it inside that we can start to change, that we can start to make a difference in our lives. And I spoke earlier about being lazy with your insights. I mean, my first experience of the principles was actually on a weekend with Paul McKenna and Michael Neal. And I'd actually gone down to see Paul McKenna because after my father died, I had put on a lot of weight because I was eating my feelings, Bonnie, rather than letting my feelings flow through me. And I meet so many clients, it's the same thing. They're drinking, they're taking drugs, they're having affairs because they're suppressing what's going on with them rather than letting life live through them. So when my dad died, I ate my feelings because I felt I had to be strong for everybody else. I thought that's what I had to do, to look after my kids, to hold down my corporate job, and to be there for my mum and my dad. And so I got to the point, I thought I need to do something about this. And this was this lovely small weekend with Paul McKenna and Michael Neal. And I wanted Paul McKenna to make me skinny. That's what I wanted. I really didn't know who Michael Neal was at the time. I'd heard friends talk about him, but I didn't know who he was. And Michael Neal started to talk. And he was talking about creativity. And the next thing I knew, I had tears rolling down my eyes. And I thought, why am I crying? What's this about? And the next morning when I woke up, I had this, and often with big insights, I actually get sort of visual representations of what's going on. And I had a white flag on one side of my brain and I had a white flag on the other side of my brain. And all I could hear was surrender. I wasn't a spiritual person, Bonnie. I had no clue what that meant. And I went in and I told Michael, I said, I had this vision. What's this about? And he just said, oh, I love it when things show up as literally as this. And he left me high and dry. And I thought, what's going on? What is this about? And I just found I had an insatiable appetite to learn about the principles after that because I wanted to find out who this guy Michael Neal was. Then Michael led me to Sid Banks and I started to read all about it. But here am I, Bonnie, 5 years on. I've lost a bit of weight, but I haven't lost the amount of weight I wanted to lose. And that's because I keep getting in my own way. I trip over myself, all the time. But what is happening is little things have changed. I don't drink coffee anymore. I don't drink tea. I don't eat gluten. I hardly drink. And these were not conscious decisions. This was just what has been unfolding for me over the last couple of years. So within that, the changes have allowed my health to become better. And I really believe that every time I've had an insight about weight, I've chased it, like a storm chaser, trying to catch it, trying to get to the eye of the storm to find out what's going on. And every time I do that, I trip over myself and I don't see anything fresh. So that's why I say to people, just be lazy with your insights. Let them do what they're going to do because that seems to be working for me better than anything else. And it works better for my clients as well. Just to let things unfold.
I hear people asking all the time, how do I get an insight? Or what do I do to get this better? And that really is the key. It's to there is not a technique. There might be things you can do that could help, but they have to come in the moment to you. and not from an outside source. And I think so. I too went through many, many years of looking for things outside of me, the self-help world, and I think that's one of the things that I really got an insight on, was that jumping into a technique because it's something I used before that helped is not the way to do it. The way to do it is to relax in that moment and see what comes through to do. And it might be a technique. Or it might.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Bonnie. It's being able to hear what it is you're meant to do in any given moment, which, as you say, is right. You know, it might be to go for a walk, it might be to take a nap, it might be just to go and listen to something, a piece of music, or, you know, maybe to listen to Sid or something like that. I mean, I worked recently with a 15-year-old girl, and she was a top athlete and she was self-harming, and she had obsessive compulsive disorder as well. A lovely, lovely girl. And when I work with young people, I don't see them in an office. We just go out and we live life. We just go out and we take walks and we talk. And I had her for 2.5 days. And on the first day, I said to her, let's just take a bus. And we jumped on a bus. And she said, where's the bus going? I said, don't know. Haven't a clue where the bus is going, but let's just take the bus and see where we end up. And we ended up, the last stop at the bus stop was at a golf course. And the golf course had a bench that overlooked the sea, the North Sea. And we just got off the bus and we sat on the bench and we talked about life. We talked about what was going on for her, how she thought things worked. And she told me about when she felt bad, there was a feeling that bubbled up inside of her that consumed her whole body, that made her feel so tense that the only way that she could get rid of the tension was to cut herself. And I just started to talk to her about another woman that I'd worked with, who had a condition called trichotillomania. And I love these names. Trichotillomania is when someone is a compulsive hair puller. They love to pull their hair out. So what that little girl had just described to me was exactly the same as this woman with trichotillomania had described to me. That she would feel so tense in herself that the only way she could release the tension was to pull her hair out one by one. And the minute that hair follicle left her body, left her head, the same way as a little girl, the minute she cut herself, that's when she felt relief. Now you imagine explaining to these two women, Bonnie, that isn't how it works. How it works is they start to think that they're stressed. The minute they start to think that they're stressed, their body releases all sorts of chemical changes. And within 3 minutes, your body's in fight or flight. It thinks it has to do something. You then have another thought that says, I need to get rid of this stress. And then you have another thought that says, the only way to get rid of this stress is to pull my hair out or to cut myself. The next thought is doing it. And then the next thought is, oh, I feel better. It's a train wreck of thoughts, one after the other, telling someone to do something, to relieve something that they made up in the first place. And the joy of seeing someone, Bonnie, wake up to that all of those thoughts going through their head, every single one of them. And I always speak about the thoughts being like the script of our life. Some people call it the rudder of a ship. For me, thoughts are the script of my life. And consciousness is awareness. It's like the special effects department. It's the Steven Spielberg of our humanness, bringing to life, adding in surround sound, adding in Technicolor, adding in all sorts of wonderful special effects to create a reality in that moment. But each of these thoughts, completely neutral. It has no meaning until we attach meaning to it. To wake up to that, Bonnie, is just been beautiful and wonderful to see other people wake up to that too. This morning, the politician I was speaking to kept going on about bad thoughts and good thoughts. And sometimes to help someone see something, repetition is a good thing. So I just kept saying to her, it's all thought. It's all thought. And then the story that I shared with her about the dog helped her see that it is all thought. And she saw in that moment that there are thoughts that she doesn't act on that have caused people to get into prison and into trouble because they've acted on those thoughts. And we talked about that being just their state of mind in the moment, allowing them to think that that was the best course of action for them. Just as the lady with trichotillomania, just as the young girl with who was self-harming, they thought that was the only course of action available to them because they were in low states of mind. That young girl after 24 hours was not self-harming. That young girl that evening did not have OCD, and it was her mother that told me. Her mother said it's completely gone. The girl herself hadn't even realised. That's how powerful this understanding is. They did nothing and everything changed.
Yeah, it really strikes me that we can fall into these different habits, whether it's pulling your hair, cutting, drinking too much, doing drugs, because we feel bad and the thought comes for us to do it, and the first thing we do relieves us, and then we do that outside attachment. That's what works.
Yes.
And it's the misunderstanding that causes those habits. They keep recreating themselves in our life. It's beautiful when you can really get underneath it and see where the
Yeah, absolutely.
love that.
Yeah. Thing is, it's so clean and it's so simple. You know, for practitioners to work with this understanding, it's really about them becoming quiet, about them hearing what it is they've to say to the client. Just like this morning when I was speaking to the politician. I mean, why would you share a story about wanting to post your dog poo with a politician? I mean, that was not on my agenda when I first went in there today. But it was the story that really helped her see how the nature of thought works, because she, in that humour, could see how she herself had those kinds of thoughts. And often these are the thoughts that we don't speak to other people about. You know, we just think it's only us. It's only us that this happens to. And it's absolutely not. So this is why, Bonnie, you know, from my perspective, raising the conscious awareness of as many human beings on this planet as we can is the next stage in human evolution. Helping other people to see their greatness and their magnificence beyond their five senses, Bonnie. Completely beyond their five senses. That's what makes a difference. People no longer relying on sight or sound or kinesthetic to experience life, but seeing the thought behind it. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions. Everybody's gone very quiet tonight.
Something weird just happened on the screen, and it made me look into the chat comment section. So Ewan said, I loved it when you said I was eating my feelings. It made me chuckle. Can you talk more about the effect that makes us?
Can you say that again, Bonnie? The effect?
It says, I loved it when you said I was eating my feelings. It made me chuckle. Can you talk more about the effect that make us?
I don't think I
quit. Sorry, it was covered up. That make us quit things that aren't good for us without even thinking about quitting.
Oh, wow. I mean, again, I can only talk about my own experience of that. And again, I'm glad you chuckled when I said eating my feelings, because that's what we do. We stop ourselves from experiencing life. That's why people go to the doctors, because they want to get antidepressives, not to feel what it is they're going through, because we've been conditioned to think that that's abnormal, to feel life flowing through us, to feel our experiences. And really, when we feel our experiences, we grow and evolve as human beings. We learn from that experience. Whenever I've sort of stopped doing anything, or any of my clients have stopped doing things that they were doing before, there definitely wasn't a how-to. There definitely was not a how to do this. It was just they felt, as well as me, sort of calmer within myself, calmer within themselves, that they understood the nature of how life works. They understood that as human beings, we're meant to experience life. We're not meant to not experience life. We're meant to have sadness and happiness and fear, and we're meant to have all of these experiences so that we learn. And in any given day, our moods and the way that we experience our life, it's like a roller coaster. It's up and down all the time. And it's being able to see these experiences, but not have your experiences have an impact on you unless you choose to let them have an impact on you. Linda Pransky says something. She says, I have my thinking, but my thinking doesn't have me. And I would say, I have my experiences, but my experiences don't have me unless I choose to let them. So I will shine conscious awareness all over all my beautiful experiences with my lovely free will, and I will enjoy them. And sometimes I will find myself very, very down and not knowing what's going on. But I'll recognise that that's what's happening, and I won't look to find out what is it that's making me feel that way. I won't look to sort of try and see, was I abandoned as a child? Did I not get that promotion 20 years ago? That boyfriend that I thought I was meant to marry, I didn't marry him. Is this why my life's the way it is? None of that makes sense to me anymore. What makes sense to me is just to recognise, oh, that's what's going on. This is what's happening for me now in this moment. I'm feeling a bit low. Okay. And I'll just get on with my life. That's if I see it. And on the other hand, oh my goodness, I love laughing. I love life. I love the humour of life. I love, as Sid said, the cosmic joke of how our lives play out and how everybody thinks life is so serious. And I'll just share a quick story with you too. I was at the Ministry of Defence. They were having all sorts of issues with stress and bullying, and they were looking to put on a day of well-being. And, the minute any organisation says to me, oh, we want to put on a day of well-being services, I just think I should just take some Band-Aids and stick them all over the place, because that ain't going to help. And as I was sitting in the office waiting to go in, this military man came in with his full uniform on. So he had all these medals and all these badges of war. And as I was sitting there, I felt myself getting quite frightened, quite intimidated by his presence. And then a fresh thought popped into my head. And all I heard was, oh, bless, he's playing dress up. The same way a child would put something on and pretend to be a cowboy or a doctor or a policeman, the same way now I see people in corporate suits going about their jobs. They're just playing dress up. They think they have to be that way in order to do their jobs. And I often sit in all sorts of boardrooms and committee rooms in the Parliament, and I want to laugh at the level of seriousness around the room. Because if we all just lightened up, that in itself allows us to see things more clearly, instead of having this holding life so tightly that you can't see clearly because you're so attached to what you think you want to happen, rather than let life unfold in front of you and just see what unfolds and go with the flow. So I don't know whether I answered that question, but I hope I did.
So we are close to coming to the end of this. I just want to invite anyone else, if you have a question, to go ahead and ask it, or just any comments on anything that Jackie said. And if not, Jackie, I want to invite you. Do you have anything that you want to say to wrap this up?
Just to say to people to really to hold life lightly and to let life live through them. Not to try to control how life unfolds. To follow their wisdom and to make space for their own insights. Not always to be chasing the next course or the next book or the next webinar, but to really live life and see how your experiences relate to how you think, and have fun with it.
And we did just get a question for you. If you have a comment, how do preferences and desires play a part in our experience of life?
That's a lovely question. How I see them, preferences and desires are just thoughts. It's all they are. Thoughts are preferences. Judgments, opinions, it's all thought. That's the starting point. Remember I spoke earlier about when we look at psychotherapies, they look at the point of behaviour. What we're talking about is the space before behaviour. So if you have a thought about something, then you're thinking about what your preference is.
I will just say, if you want a little insight into Jackie's personality, I'll read her signature line. If you email with her, you'll see this. She says, "Take care, be naughty, and let life live through you." And I think that pretty much sums up everything you said. Dominic actually has another question. He is saying, so do we just let go of them?
What would happen if you did? That's magnificent, Dominic. Yeah, our thoughts are just like balloons. They're like clouds. They just pass by. They just roll by, one after the other, after the other. There are some, like, I'm hungry. Yeah, go and eat. There are others, I need to go to the bathroom. Go to the bathroom. You will know the ones that you need to put action behind. But if we're having 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and we're putting meaning behind the vast majority of those, you're going to be exhausted. In my experience, when I speak to people, I just say to them, do you know what? Thought in itself is neutral. It's all thought. And the ones that we need to pay attention to are the ones that are loving and kind.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And if you want to learn more about Jackie or stay in touch, her website is at the bottom of the description on YouTube. It's JacquieForde.com. And I just want to mention that the 3PGC 2016 conference is coming up in October 27th through the 30th in the LA area. And you can learn more about that at 3principlesconference.org. That website is also on the description. And I know, Jackie, you've been to conferences both in the UK and in the US. Do you want to just say something about your experience at the conference?
I love 3PGC. It's one of my favourites. It's such a beautiful environment and so open and so friendly. It's yeah, I would definitely grab a ticket for 3PGC. Definitely.
Well, that's 3principlesconference.org. 3 is spelled out, and hopefully we'll see many of you there. So I'm going to steal Jackie's sign off for this webinar and say, take care, be naughty, and let life live free. Wonderful Scottish accent. I wish all of you that. Thank you, Jackie, so much.
Thank you, Bonnie.
And the next webinar is, almost forgot that, is on June 28th, and it's with Sandra Crott. So I hope to see you all then. Thank you.